All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Agile Leaders Podcast, where we unpack how the best tech and product leaders drive transformation. I'm your host, Evan Shai. Today, I'm joined by Melissa Douros, an award-winning product leader who has driven digital transformation across Discover, E-Trade, and now as the Chief Product Officer at Green Dot, another publicly traded company. She spent her career building high velocity teams and shaping financial experiences at scale. Let's dive in. Thanks for joining us, Melissa.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I guess just to kick things off, maybe you can give our audience a quick overview of your role at Green Dot and the problems that you and your team are focused on solving right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this will resonate well with the product community as if we seem to have common themes that run throughout. So a little bit about me and my team and what we do at Green Dot for just a bit of context. So as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer, a role I've been lucky enough to have for about 2 years now. And my team is responsible for the product delivery and the product design across all of the programs within the Green Dot organization. So Green Dot is known for a wide variety of these financial products. We have our direct-to-consumer vans, we have our tax processing software, we have our pay card and on-demand platform, and then we also are very well known for our best-in-class fast services. So we started as a prepaid card. Over the years, we have, through a series of acquisitions and product setups, really become known as a leader in the financial services space, and all laddering up to our product strategy of providing life-centric financial services for people.
Incredible. And you've led product across both large regulated enterprises and high velocity fintech environments. Would you say Green Dot operates more like a fast moving startup or slower and kind of methodically like an enterprise?
Yes. So I would say that there are pockets of both.
Yeah.
And so, a big piece of that is making sure that companies are always going through transformations. And so over the years, sometimes when I join, it's, hey, we have this well mapped out plan. We need someone to execute on it. And sometimes when I join, we have pieces of that, but we really need someone to come in and just kind of figure out what we're going to do. And so I've really been, I would say it's the latter at Green Dot, and have really been given the autonomy to kind of decide, what's going to be the best practices to put in place alongside our Chief Technology Officer to make sure that we're building efficiently, building with quality, creating the best experience, and moving faster and faster every day.
Always faster, right? But particularly in your space, it's like, how can you move fast but still do it safely and responsibly? Because the ramifications of not doing that are meaningful for sure. Are there any frameworks or kind of mental models that you use to kind of guide the process for you to, one, identify and define what that strategy is, but then also to get buy-in across the organization and even across your peers in the C-suite and the board?
Yeah. So I want to talk about how the huge transformation we're doing right now to move from the project methodology to the product delivery model. And the product delivery model is not new, but it is something that's new to us. And so we've largely been operating, I would say, as we talked about the startup and the large publicly traded company, is kind of been operating as a startup a bit in that project methodology and not really organizing the people around the products that we offer. And so over the years, I've been part of and led many transformations. And this has included things from the way we work from an internal process perspective. Do you have a PMO? Do you not have a PMO? Into moving from waterfall to Scrum Agile, then to Safe Agile, then back to Scrum Agile. But really the one that has been the most transformative is organizing not just the product team and the technology team around a model, but really the whole cross-functional stakeholder group. And I think that's what really sets apart the product delivery model. You take a 30,000 foot view of what you offer, and you group those experiences and applications together from the customer perspective. So it's not around the people that work there today. It's not around the current processes, but really the approach is determining, what is your company responsible for delivering and organizing the approach around that. And then the product delivery model, the other thing I would mention is it's very outcomes based. So the projects that people do They are defined by scope, by time, by budget. They have a start and they have a stop. When you talk about delivering on products, you work in a phrase that's called initiatives, which is not time and budget based. Initiatives have sometimes large multi-year journeys. It's a grouping of experiences that you want to deliver, and you may have a 3 to 5 year roadmap, but 2 years from now may look very different than what you've planned, because what you're delivering, the teams, as they organize together, they're able to understand what's been working, what's not been working. They demand user feedback. They really want to get, how customers are interacting with it. And then they start to actually be empowered to offer up continuous improvement features that they want to build, which is a little bit different than always having something come from the top, which is, kind of runs rampant with the project methodology.
The one thing that's a common thread across all the enterprises even that we work with is the kind of fits and starts that have come with attempts at trying to drive agile transformation and agile ways of working across the organization. And agile has been around for so long, and I've spent a lot of time in startups. It seems like we're kind of going back in time, that there's still this kind of struggle to get there, but it's a lot more complicated when you're dealing with a large organization. And oftentimes those struggles have even been confined to the technology and product teams, but you're talking about doing it cross-functionally across teams. Is there any kind of best practices that you've used that have allowed these transformations to really take hold and be retained and executed? It seems like you've learned something there that has allowed you to be successful.
Yes. I think telling people what to do always seems to fall flat. Bringing people along on the journey is the best way to do it. And I know that's an easy statement to make and harder to do in practice, but I'm lucky, just given where I am in where I sit in the organization, that I've got access to the people who are really the decision makers in the organization. So all the way from the CEO to the bottom, I want people to truly understand the why that we are doing it. And so the transparency is key to that. So I've forced them to read articles on it. I've gone to team meetings and presented on it. And it's an over and over and over type of narrative that you want to have, right? And when you're sick of hearing yourself say it, that means you're probably about halfway done, right?
That's so true.
Keep bringing people along for the ride. And so, part of it has been leading on best practices, things that I've done and learned in the past, acknowledging the fact that those aren't going to be the best things to do here, right? I really had to sit and wait and listen and understand the problems in the delivery. What are we facing? What are the teams facing? Did a lot of user research, even when people didn't know what I was doing, sort of masked in that one-on-one to understand the problems, the pain points. Does the company want autonomy? Does the company, always want things to come from the top? Are we looking for more metrics? And do we have a data problem where we're data rich but insights poor? So you kind of have to understand and massage that transformation for what the company needs, and then you can articulate. Here's what I heard from you. Here are the issues. Here are the problems to solve, and then here are the things that we're going to put in place to do it. But another piece of that is acknowledging that it's not going to be perfect on the first try. And so I was actually at a conference at ProductCon a couple of weeks ago, and one of the other panelists said to me, "I wish you luck. That has never been successful, in anything I've been." And I like to just rip the Band-Aid and go, right? Like, just have a POC. I get it. It's something that people try, but we're not a giant organization. We're a little over 1,000 people. We can get together and we like to do hard things well. That's a lot ingrained in our culture. And so, as we're going along this ride, I provide weekly updates. Here's again why we're doing it. Here's what's happening now. Here's what's next. Invite me to your team meeting. I want to keep talking about this. I want you to understand the value associated with it. And so, it's not a organization by consensus, but it is an organization by understanding, what people need and that they're truly bought into it. The last thing I would say is, we have ways that we're doing things, and this is not unique to Green Dot. It's been conditioned in us over the year. And even if our processes are held together with bubblegum and rubber bands, they're ours. We know how to do them. We know how to navigate them. And there will be a point in a transformation where we go back to those. And so we have to bring each other along and nudge each other and very confidently, but very cross-functionally say, hey, that's what we used to do and who we used to be, not who we're going to be in the future.
I love that. I love that. I wonder if the fact that you're doing it cross-functionally actually operates as a reinforcing mechanism because it is happening everywhere across the organization and not just in these kind of isolated silos to where every time you're engaging cross-functionally, you're, kind of unlearning some of those best practices or behaviors. Just kind of a quick thought.
Mm.
Okay, so you guys have we talked about the methodology. There's obviously, a platform shift happening right now. I don't know if you've heard about it, but the AI. How are you guys thinking about, artificial intelligence at Green Dot? I'm sure you've been, leveraging the technology, generally for quite some time. But how is it starting to permeate customer experiences and your product development roadmap?
Yes. So as you mentioned, AI is all the rage, right? If you haven't heard about it, it's I don't know where you are, but sometimes AI makes sense to eliminate pieces of a job, and sometimes it makes sense to eliminate whole job functions to be more efficient and effective. I tend to think of it more as sort of an augmentation of staff. Because I really want to make sure that we are governing it correctly, that we're making sure we're using it correctly, that we're exploring new spaces. And so I would say, one way that we're using it, one way that we started using it actually earlier this year is within our agent experience. So we have a continuous improvement goal of always trying to enhance our call quality and obviously, as most companies, to reduce our average handling time. So we selected a vendor partner and we actually adopted 2 use cases within the agent experience. So the first one is notating the call at the end. So you can imagine that an agent doesn't have to spend time notating what happened. They can more easily move on to the next call, increasing efficiency. The second one is call sentiment. So we are very responsible for, in this regulated environment, for understanding our complaints and making sure that we are accurately correcting them as a future progress. So what we've done is use AI to capture call sentiment. So if a call started off negative and ended positive, we'll be able to track that. Vice versa, we're negative and ended negative, then we know we've got some work to do. And this also helps with agent training. So we really understand how the agent is progressing through the call. However, we would not be able to have done this if we did not establish good AI governance at the top. And I think that's the thing that's most important is from our board down, we are encouraged to explore use cases of AI, but we need to make sure that we are doing it in a way that's good for our customers, good for our company, and very transparent to the regulators. So we have an AI task force. We meet monthly. There's a group of us. People are welcome to come in and show us explorations that they would want to do, or, and most importantly, actually, is tools that we already have that are introducing AI within it. So we have a design tool that we use where after a product designer creates the screens, the AI can actually create a clickable prototype so that we can ship that off for user research. Creating that prototype is a very arduous task and took days sometimes for and actually coding from our product designers to do it, which is a skill set that they don't always have. And so what we want to make sure, though, is that the usage of that AI, there's not a lot of customer data going into it or anything where, in this regulated environment that we wouldn't want to do. So saving time, but also I need someone still to make sure that they're going through the prototype, that it was created correctly, that the usage of it is within the AI task force, and that it's being shipped off to the to user testing in the correct format. So it's not a replacement, but it is an augmentation which frees up that product designer to do other work.
Super helpful. I have a million questions in there. With the sentiment analysis on the calls, is like how are you actually getting the pre-sentiment kind of evaluation and the post? Is it just kind of like listening to the calls, or is it some kind of like data that's being submitted? Just curious how that actually works.
Yep, it's both actually. So all of the calls are recorded, and I'm sure you've heard that prompt in the beginning of a customer service call, right? Recorded for quality purposes, and that's one of those quality purposes. It's the ability to, for that AI tool, can gauge the sentiment of it immediately when the call starts. People are generally very emotional when it's a high stress conversation, and then voice kind of tapers off. So they have all of these systematic points that they use to gauge that analysis, and then they're able to ship us in a report, and we walk through it and understand what happened.
Very cool. Very cool. And you mentioned you guys are working with a third-party vendor. As you think about the kind of buy versus build equation for you guys, I guess, how do you think about that? When does it make sense to, drive down the build it yourself or buy and engage with a third-party solution?
Yeah, and it's something that we don't take lightly. As you can imagine, the more vendors you have, the more overhead there is from an info security perspective, from a technology perspective, and so we want to make sure we're choosing the right vendors. I would say, in financial services, that's maybe an easier question. If there's something even peripherally that we offer, if it's something that is that we're used to, or that we know is going to be highly regulated as a financial product, we tend to make the build, decision. With AI, though, we're not an AI shop. We want to provide AI through financial services if it's helpful on behalf of the customer. So generally, right now, I would say it's more of a buy perspective. I know that our CTO is actually looking into using AI from a coding perspective on one of our front end experiences, as the team is able to create a common component design system that's very fluid and across all of the digital equities. We're able to do a little bit more things in a repeat and reuse fashion. And so if we could have AI actually code our front end experiences, that would be something that we would do more in-house.
Sure. And generally, I know the financial services companies that we work with, it's a pretty, long process to be, a partner and approved vendor and the whole procurement process. Are you guys generally looking at vendors that you already work with, or because they're emerging technologies or emerging capabilities, you guys are looking kind of outside into new providers that could be offering solutions?
Yeah, that's an important aspect to choosing a vendor, and I would say sometimes we've made decisions in the past based on how long it takes.
Yeah.
But our TPRM, right, our third party management team, they're always helping us make it more efficient and listening to, I would say, our complaints of how inefficient it can be sometimes. I think just generally where we bottleneck a bit, and for a good reason, is making sure that is there customer data flowing into this AI third party tool? Is it going to be protected in the right way? Do we need it? Because if we don't, then it's a lot less. And then I think I would say the biggest thing is probably making sure that we are able to be transparent with the data that's flowing in, because when working in a heavily regulated industry, we always have to have the ability to peel that back and really walk through the regulators with it in very layman's terms, and so that they can understand it and articulate it back, within their own teams. And so I think a lot of it is just, very heavily based on working with that team and making sure that we are continuously improving for efficiency.
Makes complete sense. When you guys are driving new AI initiatives, and we can even use some of the use cases that you've articulated, and it sounds like you have a supportive board to experiment and try things in any case, but presumably everyone's trying to drive towards some kind of customer or business value that can be captured. Are there like two or three signals that you are looking at early on that give you a sense of whether there's real customer value or partner value being unlocked, and that it isn't just like a pure kind of science experiment, you're turning it into an AI lab or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think much like many other, product teams and organizations, we only have a finite amount of money and resources. We can't do everything and can't do everything all at once. And so I would say that we've been very meticulous and deliberate about who we've chosen to work with. There's an additional use case that I'm hiring for a new director of design and UX, and that person will come in, and I want them to find a user research tool that uses AI to pull off all of the insights of how customers are using the properties. So, I think we do a lot of user research up front, but you can really only garner so much from someone when it's not their money. And so once it's out in the wild, right, and they're sending money to a friend or trying to pay a bill, there's a lot more rich data you can collect. And so I want someone to be able to come in and use an AI tool to not just grab the data, but glean the insights. And I think that's where AI really can be a powerful tool moving forward for us.
Love that. We've been evaluating some tools along the same lines. I think there's such a really unique opportunity and unlock where AI, I think there's just such an intuitive use case that could be meaningful there on the research side of things. So
Yeah.
happy to share what we found,
I love
if
that.
useful.
I think what's
Uh,
interesting though, and to your point about what do I look for, maybe the two or three things is, I would say the big thing I'm looking for right now is how do people use AI now or in the future to unlock growth? Because I'm finding a lot of efficiency saves either by eliminating people, which is a whole other thing, right? If we eliminate the whole entry level workforce who's populating the management roles, but tending, as I mentioned, tending to use it more as an augmentation of my current staff. But I have yet to really been able to uncover a white paper or a company who has said, I have used this AI tool and it has unlocked 10%, 15%, ROI on it. And I'm open to, conversations with anyone who has that.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I think, probably part of it, at least initially, to the extent that you're constrained by getting buy-in and allocating resources and your ability to efficiently tell a story that demonstrates the ROI case to be made, the savings is just such a faster kind of path to initially get buy-in. And it's kind of, again, it's more intuitive and clear of what financial value can be, realized as a consequence of implementing this new use case. Whereas so many of the, there's still like augmentation or amplifiers, but so many of the like true new value unlocks that can be, catalyzed by AI. I think there's just still so much ahead of us of what we're going to find out it can actually do. And it's probably harder to measure at this point in the game what everyone being able to ship new prototypes faster ultimately is doing for the company's top or bottom line in the long term.
Yeah, it's very true. And also, I would say that it's about customer trust, especially in financial services. I think when you're in travel and maybe working on, products and great experiences for people that isn't about safeguarding their money or giving them insights on how to spend better or save better or spend smarter, it can be very difficult. And so I have to balance the research of customer perceptions of AI with the sort of flashy new tools that are out there. And where we still are is customers are saying that they believe AI is a great tool for financial services for small tasks. And so if it's giving them a very simple thing to do, they are very interested in it. However, if it's a larger, right, if it's planning their entire budget or how they should spend their money, they're a little bit more uneasy. Now, I think, as you mentioned, we're kind of still in our infancy. It's still unlocking, and we'll learn about it more as we go. As it becomes more table stakes, and commonplace as people are using it more and more, that will change. I just kind of have to balance that, right? The trust in the product at the same time.
Totally get that. Yeah, stakes are higher when you're dealing with people's money. That's for sure. And you mentioned the task force, which I think is so critically important, and to be thinking about compliance and governance from the onset. I guess how was the task force ultimately formed? Were there kind of archetypes or profiles that you thought were particularly important to be contributing to it?
So we want to make sure we're balancing forward-looking, expense, and compliance. And so the makeup of the task force really has those makeups of the people. So CFO, CTO, CPO, Chief Risk Officer, those are the people that really are going to be both wary of the tool that we're going to be using, but also, want to go really fast and use exciting things.
Totally get that. I guess how involved are they in the actual project or initiative evaluation step? Like when are they seeing the initiatives that are being proposed, and are they ultimately approving the go forward?
Definitely approving. And I would
Yeah.
say that our legal and our risk officer are very involved in the approval. They like
Okay.
people to research the tool and talk to the vendor and find out exactly what they're doing, what kind of customer data they keep, how long they store it for, our access to it, to really mitigate that risk. And so, I would say from an approval perspective, we're kind of all involved in it. From a bring forth perspective, anyone can. I have someone who's been exploring using AI for writing test cases for you have your user stories, you have requirements in there. You can use AI to actually generate the test cases. We do a lot of rinse and repeat as we onboard new embedded finance partners, and they choose a similar set of core products that we have. We can actually use AI to repeat those user stories that are written before. So those are the types of things that we're going to be reviewing and just making sure that it's passes the snuff test of whether or not it's going to be an issue with our regulators and whether or not it's good for our customers.
Since it sounds like you guys have done, so many AI initiatives even already, are you seeing a kind of a common pattern, or where you see AI initiatives most often introduce hidden risk? And how do you try to catch those issues before they scale, aside from having a really robust task force?
Yeah, honestly, I think we've been a little lean on what we've implemented, just sort of over indexing on very transparent tools, right? If I think about the coding, we can definitely see the code. We can go through the lines of it, we can see it. If I think about the agent call, we can go back, we can review the notes, we can listen to the call recording, we can make sure that it's done properly. So I think we've kind of over indexed a bit on the very transparent ones and the ones that we maybe more understand. Where I'd like to just kind of see us push and use the task force a little bit better is to come up with those things that are maybe not necessarily eliminations of work, but a way to mature and strengthen what we're doing. Here we've talked about the user research, talked about the creating the prototypes, which again is probably something that we can still review very easily. But when I think about the digital behavior, just making sure it's compliant and that we're not sending the customer data. But I think that is a good instance of something that we have not explored before and can really unlock a great value moving forward.
I mean, how do you balance the push for speed, with the need to maintain trust and predictability? How are you driving for efficiency and velocity in a naturally constrained environment?
One of the biggest ways that we're going to do that going forward is moving to this product delivery model.
Okay.
When people organize around products and they continuously do the same things over and over, they're able to figure out where the tech debt is, where the bodies are buried, and they want to fix it. They demand to fix it because it will make them move faster. And so as we move into this and we think about increased throughput, we think about our CapEx plan, we have a finite again amount of money and resources. A way to actually increase that throughput is to make them responsible for the same things over and over. As they demand to be able to fix that, they're really uncovering where people have made shortcuts in the past in order to get into that time and budget methodology. And this may take a little bit longer, but it's going to make them faster in the long run.
I love it. Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, Melissa. Are there any kind of 2 to 3 best practices you would leave for product leaders out there who are operating in highly regulated industries like banking, financial services, as they think about how to implement AI in their organization?
Yes, I would really say transparency and communication. And I know that those seem like very simple things to do, but we tend to forego them when we're running really fast or when we're doing something new. We get nervous, we don't want people to say no before we even started, we want to prove the value. And so as you're articulating through transparency and communication, you always want to remember that the person on the other side of you doesn't necessarily find the same type of value that you do. And so you may not win the first time. You may have to go back to them. But the key to it is unlocking what will be important for them, what are their team's goals, what is the value that they would derive from it, and create your story that's going to match that. And that's where you're really going to get their buy-in and really help you evangelize it throughout the organization.
I love it. And hopefully come up with a stronger initiative and idea as a consequence of the friction applied from all these other perspectives as well. Awesome. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for joining today. I certainly learned a lot from you, and I can imagine all of our audience will really appreciate the insights that you were generous enough to share with us. And wishing you nothing but success as you continue on this exciting path at Green Dot.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Melissa.